Hello, hello. Welcome to Top Shelf Backpacking, Intro to Backpacking Part 2. Today we're discussing the big three, otherwise known as your sleep system, your tent, and your backpack, items you need to either borrow or buy to get out on trail for your first backpacking trip. Starting with your sleeping pad. You need something soft, not just for comfort, but to help insulate you from the cold ground. I would put sleeping pads into two different categories. You have your foam and your inflatable. The most common style of pad you might see out there, and one of the most budget friendly, is the accordion style foam. This one is from Thermarest. Nemo makes a popular one. There's also generic ones out there that can be had for $40 or less. These are typically a 1 to 2 R value. R value is the amount of insulation they give. So this will keep you warm in the warmer months, but you wouldn't want this on its own for temps below freezing. I find these are not very comfortable as a side sleeper. Often they're not very wide, so if you toss and turn, they're not great options, but they are budget friendly and weight friendly, most of them weighing a pound or less. There are also 1/8 inch foam pads for the crazy ultralighters out there. These are nice additions if you're trying to boost the R value of an inflatable one, or if you're really worried about poking holes in your inflatable pad. They can also be nice as a spot to sit, something to nap on, just kind of a supplemental piece. These are typically $20 to $30 and weigh only a few ounces, so they can be a nice addition, but unless you're a seasoned backpacker and you know how you sleep, I would not recommend starting with something quite this drastic. When it comes to inflatable pads, there are budget options such as this Trekology, all the way up to $300, some even plus, options from some of the more known brands like Thermarest and Nemo. These pack down fairly small, typically weigh somewhere 2 pounds or less, even for some of the budget ones. This Nemo comes in at around 18 ounces, I believe, and you can see they fit nicely in the pack, and then when you inflate them, the standard size for an inflated pad is 20 inches wide by 72 inches long. I am a fan of wider pads, like this Trekology. This guy costs only $40, but comes in at 22 inches wide by 75 inches long. Or this Nemo, this is the Tensor insulated. This guy is 25 inches wide and 72 inches long. So they do come in all kinds of sizes. Keep in mind, the bigger it is, the heavier it's going to be. Also, the cheaper it is, typically the bulkier and the colder it's going to sleep, so not quite as much R value, so less insulation to keep you warm if you're backpacking in the cold. When it comes to the sleeping bag to go on top of your sleeping pad, there are a couple different categories there. Now, I'm hoping at this point you've done a little car camping, and you hopefully know the difference between a standard, a traditional rectangular sleeping bag and a mummy-style sleeping bag. So you know if you can deal with the confines of a mummy-style, which has a taper and is rather tight on you to reduce the amount of airspace that you have to keep warm, which one helps keep you warmer while keeping the weight down so you don't have this big heavy bag. If you're like me, you toss and turn, or just don't like feeling confined, then maybe a mummy style bag is not for you. For those of you that don't like being confined and want to shed weight, then maybe a quilt is for you. A quilt works by removing basically the back portion of a sleeping bag, because if you compress the down or the insulation, it loses its ability to keep you warm. So why even have it there, especially if you're going out in warmer temps, freezing and above. Sleeping quilts typically strap to your sleeping pad, which helps keep them in place, especially nice if you're tossing and turning. And some will even convert to being fully open, almost like a blanket. The benefit of this is it's much more versatile as far as the temperatures you can take it into, and it allows you to move around without having a much bulkier rectangular style sleeping bag, which can weigh you down and take up a lot of room inside of your pack. A couple of things to keep in mind when selecting a sleeping bag or a sleeping quilt is often they will come with some sort of temperature rating. So this Nemo Sonic has a 0-degree rating. The majority of manufacturers out there have what they call a lower limit or a safety rating, meaning if I was in this in my normal base layers down to 0, chances are pretty good I'll be alive in the morning, but I'm not going to have a good night. Sleep is probably going to be rough. I'll probably be moving around a lot, jumping jacks, crunches, those kind of things to try and keep myself warm. Typically, rule of thumb, 10 degrees above that comfort rate or that lower limit rating is a comfort rating. So something you could be comfortable in. So at 10 to 15 degrees, going to be comfortable. 20 to 30 degrees, might even be a little bit warm. This particular bag has little gills I can unzip to allow some of the heat to come out. The nice thing about a quilt, you start to get too hot, you can stick your arms out, you can stick your leg out the bottom. Pretty versatile as far as getting rid of that heat. So this 20-degree sleeping quilt, which weighs just over a pound, is nice and versatile. I can use it basically from 50 all the way down to 30 degrees comfortably. Now those limit ratings are typically done with just a base layer. So if you have some puffy jackets, some additional clothing you're going to be putting on, you can add a little bit there. You can also stack sleeping bags, meaning if I was taking this down into below 0, I could put this 20-degree quilt over it and it would kind of compound the warmth there, keeping me down even lower than its 0-degree rating. So keep that in mind if you have a couple sleeping bags or a quilt and a sleeping bag or a couple of quilts. You might be able to combine them to get to even lower temperatures. Once you've decided on your sleeping pad and sleeping bag or quilt setup, now it's time to go on and look at your tent. I do think it's important to figure out your sleep system first, because if you want to have someone with you and you both want 25-inch wide sleeping pads, then you want to make sure your 2-person or 3-person tent is wide enough to accommodate that. So I do recommend starting with the sleep system, then moving on to the tent. Now tents come in all different sizes, configurations. You've got 1-person, 2-person, 3-person. If you're going with a group, potentially a 4. There's also tarps to consider. I would say tarps are a little more advanced because there's more to setting them up. So I would leave that too once you've honed your skills a little bit. I would break down tents into 3 different categories. Now maybe you have a Coleman dome tent, something you've taken out car camping with you. If it's less than 7 pounds, maybe that's worth bringing with you. That would be what I would consider a fully freestanding tent, meaning you have poles with it. You don't technically need stakes to actually pitch it. You can just put your gear in there to keep it weighed down. Next up, you have semi-freestanding tents, things like the Nature Hike Cloud Up 1 and 3 I have here. These do come with pole sets, but to fully pitch them, you do need tent stakes to get everything nice and taut, get the vestibules pitched out. They are easy to move around, you can easily change them, but you do really need tent stakes to get a full pitch. These are also what they would consider an inner and outer tent, so a 2-piece if you will, meaning there's a separate rain fly from the inner body. That can be kind of nice, so if you want to keep the bugs off you but you're not expecting rain, you can leave the rain fly off or partially on, and that way when you wake up at night you can enjoy the stars. Then there are single wall shelters, which can take a little more getting used to. They are a little more prone to getting condensation on you. You can get condensation on either of them, but because with that mesh inner, it's more likely to drip down onto you. These can take a little more skill to set up. So you have fully freestanding, semi-freestanding, and then what I would consider non-freestanding or a trekking pole style tent. So this Z-Pax duplex of mine requires 2 trekking poles to set up. Now I always hike with trekking poles, often elevation, not the most graceful thing on trail, especially if you've ever seen my bloopers. So these are with me anyway, so the fact that I can use these as tent poles to shave some weight is a bonus for me. It did take a little bit of getting used to set up a trekking pole style tent, but once I got it down, it's kind of become second nature to me. Now a lot of trekking pole tents use exotic materials like Dyneema, which can be very expensive. I think this tent these days goes for like $700. If you're starting out, I definitely do not recommend that unless you can borrow one or rent one for incredibly cheap, but there are cheaper options out there. My buddy uses I want to say it was like a $50 or $60 2-person, looks like a little pup tent style tent that sets up with trekking poles. It uses either a nylon or a polyester material. Weighs a couple pounds, but it's still lighter than the poled versions here. And since he typically hikes with trekking poles as well, that makes sense for his setup. Whichever route you take, the trekking pole, freestanding, semi-freestanding, I do recommend you set it up first just to be familiar with it and to make sure everything functions correctly. Even if you're renting it from a reputable place like an REI, just make sure there isn't a split pole or something in there or missing tent stakes. Now, if you lived in an apartment like I did when I started, this means you get to be that weirdo at the park, pitching a tent, trying to not completely look homeless. But usually once you start breaking your tent down in the first 10-15 minutes, people don't look at you too sideways. Always get to practice. If you can get out and actually spend the night in the yard, I do recommend it, just to make sure if you need seam sealing or anything to keep the rain out. It's just good to be familiar with things before you're, 10 miles deep on a trail trying to pitch it for the first time and realizing, oh, I don't know how to do this, and I'm not even sure everything I need is even in here. So that's where you don't want to be figuring that out. So set up your tent first. So once you've got your sleeping pad, your sleeping bag or quilt, and your tent sorted, then you can go on to what you need to carry it all. The final piece of gear you'll want for the big three is the backpack itself, something to carry everything in. Now, a lot of folks will tell you, you want to buy your backpack last. What that means is you want to get all the other gear you're going to need first, so you know exactly what size bag you'll need to fit all that gear. Now, here's something I have never ever seen before. Welcome to REI. My name's Granola. How can I help you? Oh, hey man, my name's Peter. I'm just getting in a backpack. I just need a backpack for... I would break backpacks down into 3 categories. Some of them are going to carry more than others. Starting off, I just recommend getting something in the 50 to probably 70 liter range, knowing that if you have more gear than will fit in there, you might need to shed some things from that and try not to take quite as much stuff. Those 3 categories of backpacks are your more traditional frame style backpack. These will often cost anywhere from $80 for a nice Teton on Amazon up to hundreds and hundreds. This Osprey, close to 300 and some bucks. These guys will usually weigh a few pounds, up to I've seen 6-7 pounds. Could be more depending on the feature set you have, but try to get one that carries 50 to 70 liters if you're starting out. That should be a good size. The cooler conditions you plan to go in, the larger capacity you're going to want, because typically the more clothing you're going to want to bring or the more bulky items for staying warm. Next up, we have an ultralight backpack with a frame. This is my Z-Packs Arc Blast. This guy also cost hundreds of dollars. I want to say around $350, so a little more expensive than the Osprey, but it weighs significantly less. To me, it's still quite comfortable. It has a trampoline style back still and transfers loads really nicely down to the hips, all while doing it for sub 2 pounds. So a very nice bang for the buck as far as weight goes. Still carries 30 plus pounds very comfortably. Next up, we have a frameless pack. These are typically going to be ultralight options. They have no metal, nothing to them, which saves you a bit of weight. You can kind of create your own frames using kind of based on how you pack your gear. Often these are going to be smaller in capacity, so usually like 40 liters and under for a frameless pack, because if you carry more than 20 pounds, most people find them kind of uncomfortable. I would leave this for the more advanced. Once you get your kit dialed in, this might be something to look toward. Often they can be a little cheaper than their ultralight cousins because there's no framing material in there and a little less design going in. Now there's a good chance if you're like me, you do a lot of day hiking, so you have a day pack. These are often frameless, even if they are framed, they're smaller. You may be tempted to see if you can strap everything to it. I would say don't do that, however much I like using gear you already have. Often they're not designed to carry that kind of weight. You'll find things are very uncomfortable, and you may have to make sacrifices in the gear you should carry, which could lead to leaving things behind that you really should have taken with you. So there you have it. Those are the big 3, the items you need to either suss out if you've got ones that will work for you, or find them to borrow, to rent, or to buy. Check back next week for episode 3, where we will dive in deeper as to what it takes to begin your beginner journey out on the trail. For more information on all the items you see on this channel, visit topshelfbackpacking.com. And until I see you again, cheers.